All right, it is recording. Welcome, Brian. Hey.
Welcome, Elijah.
Cool. So this will be recorded. It'll be uploaded. I don't know if we're going to have any actual live viewers, but we might. But the cool thing is that it's recorded, and maybe some other people can like learn a little bit about this by some of my kind of noob questions. I'm not afraid to ask like super basic questions. I know things, but I don't know everything. So,
Hey, welcome to everybody.
yeah, right. Make people feel more comfortable with like it's okay to ask what some people consider stupid questions, but I don't really consider them stupid. Just general questions. So I've had so many people like after I ask questions, and audiences are like, "Well, I had that question too, so thanks for asking that." But so many people are like afraid to ask these questions. So, anyways, I have seen. So just to preface this, Brian, I saw you demonstrate like a drush. You said drush recipes.
Yep, Drush recipes.
Yeah, at Drupadelphia. It was like, gosh, it was like 4 or 5 years ago, I think. It was, and I remember you had a drush DVR command, which could like play back drush commands.
Oh yeah, it does that. Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that's deep. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the height of my laziness when it came to automation with Drupal. It was, I mean, it was kind of, I was inspired by like some of the package JSON type of stuff you see in like NPM and things, where you just have a series of commands or like YAML files of, hey, run through these bash scripts or whatever. And then that became, well, I know people that can run Drupal and Drush commands, but they don't have access to do, bash scripting and stuff on their server. So what if we just keep it in this format that'll run forever? But the problem with something like that is that then I think like a year later, someone asked me how that project was going. I was like, what do you mean how it's going? I mean, like it worked. I use it. It runs all the time in some of our system setups, and then, we kind of move on.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. But so yeah, it's done. It works. It's good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. That's great. Is it Drupal? It's not True Drush. I guess Drush is probably, I was probably like Drush 6 or 7 then.
Yeah, I think it worked with like, I don't know what they did with the versions because I haven't paid as much attention to Drupal 8 when it comes to that stuff. But I feel like it largely still works in the latest version of Drush, but I haven't run it in some time. But it probably is a stark contrast to what it is you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. But that's like some good context for like how I remember first like meeting you, and I was out in New York City at the time in that area, and we kind of overlapped in the Philadelphia, the Drupadelphia, and the New York City Drupal community and whatnot. So cool. All right, so I have seen you posting a lot about HAX the web, Headless Authoring Experience, it stands for. And I'm just really curious to dig a little deeper. You posted like a DAT URL scheme the other day. Then I ended up installing the Beaker browser, and I was able to actually load the DAT URL, and it was like just trying to wrap my head around all this stuff, because it seems like you have a vision, and I'd like to just learn more about your vision and what's going on there.
Yeah, HAX is, so we'll preface HAX and then we get into Beaker browser because that gets a little crazy town. I apparently disrupted your entire day, or at least for a few hours there. If you get, I mean, because you can go, we've gone into Beaker before on our team, and it's like, oh, then I could build this other thing to connect to you, and you give it to me, and it's like, it makes decentralized web more accessible to the masses in general, and to kind of be able to visualize it. But yeah, it is a little bit of a pipe dream. So the HAX is Headless Authoring Experience, which our idea was like, okay, the authoring experience, I mean, our primary focus was like the authoring experience in Drupal is kind of meh as a result of just like, and I'm talking baseline, authoring experience, right? I don't mean like
Because it's very coupled and it doesn't change very easily, right?
Yeah. I'm in this case, I'm referencing more like the CK editor or TinyMC era, right? So like Drupal historically, and then now Drupal has that as a starting point. And I have, we know each other from a Drupal-based background. That's kind of where I'm coming out of with this stuff. And as we were looking through and saying like, well, let's make the experience better, because the primary thing I work on is that logo back there, which stands for Elms Learning Network. So it's like this Drupal system that's like this crazy multi-site type of a beast, which is why I had to write that Drush recipe automation thing. But it was,
just to preface real quick, your main kind of work right now is Elms, which is that a learning management system that's like open source and is like sponsored by your university? Like, how is that? Because I think the HAX work that you're doing is kind of just a piece of that. Is that?
Yeah. So like the vision of HAX is heavily influenced by my other project, which is Elms Learning Network. So it was like the original problem being, we want authoring to be better in Elms Learning Network, or authoring rather. But then that system is constructed out of Drupal. So then it's okay, well, how do we make the Drupal authoring experience better? Is kind of where that starting point is. Elms Learning Network is based out of Penn State. I work in College of Arts and Architecture here. There's another developer, Nikki Massaro Kaufman, that I presented with at DrupalCon last year in Nashville, around HAX. And then there's usually some setup of like, hey, we work on Elms, and maybe you've heard of me through Elms, but that's like one piece of the, one piece of the puzzle here. Similarly, it's weird to talk to people about HAX, and then they'll be like, what happened to that Elms thing? I'm like, oh, I'm still working on that. It's, this is for that, right? So we always try to build these like hyper abstracted projects to meet our goals. So like over the years, I have over 100 Drupal modules contributed as a result of Elms. Right now we're sitting on 163 web components contributed as part of HAX, or that have stemmed from HAX, we'll say.
So I just want to touch base really quick, because I'm kind of catching up some of this stuff. Where's like the de facto web component? Like when you say contributed web components, is that just like a scatter-based bunch of Git repos, or is there like a central hub for web components these days?
So it's yes, it's both. So the general way to do it now is via npm. So like I would make a web component, which is this little JavaScript, snippet, if you want to call it that. And then I would throw it up on GitHub so I can manage it in version control. And then I would cut packages off of that for npm for publishing. Then I would go to webcomponents.org, much like Drupal.org. And then I would say publish element, and I would copy my npm repo address. And then the webcomponents.org site kind of harvests data off of that and does some like push hooks integrations, so that like, whenever I push my code up to npm, you go and search on webcomponents.org for my element name, it comes up, and you go to the whole project page or whatever. It's just giving you details of like, here's how to get this from npm, and here's the GitHub link. So it's
a discovery layer, basically.
Yeah, I mean, so like the web component standard and its conception goes back quite a ways. I mean, like 2011 or even earlier, like conversations around it. And so part of the problem, I think, that Google, who really like was instrumental in this standard being adopted at all, part of what they were trying to solve is like, okay, so you have React and Vue and Angular and these other projects, and they're like their own dedicated thing, that have their own dedicated marketing, that have their own dedicated hub of here's where you go to learn new info. And then web components is like, it's a standard. But if more people adopt the standard, then all of us get greater benefit from it. So it's like you almost kind of need a community hub, marketing presence, tutorial land just for a standard. So, I mean, Google built the webcomponents.org site. It is a rather open community site. I mean, I've gotten a lot of contributions accepted to it as far as updating documentation, publishing like an article on there and stuff. So it's weird, right? It definitely, especially coming into it from other contexts, is kind of like, where did all this come from?
Okay. All right. So that was a little segue off web components, but so webcomponents.org basically is like this consuming surfacing layer, discover, like an app store almost.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to think of it.
And most generally people publish an NPM package. And that's what when you say you contributed 100 web components, that's kind of the flow of most of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have we have what's called a mono repo. That is github.com, elmsln, and then it's /lrn web components. So it has all of our elements in it that, if you wanted to download and develop the element library that we have directly, you could get that in one place. But then if you're going to actually implement any of those elements, you can run the individual NPM commands and just use the pieces that you want.
Okay, so like a local development type thing, you can run, like you install it locally, you're saying, or you're saying then or once it's published, you'd run that?
It'd be more like you say, wow, I want to fix this issue in this one tag that you guys have done.
Yeah.
So I'm going to clone your element catalog, fix it, do a PR back to the element catalog. I accept it. And then I run Lerna publish, which Lerna is a mono repo manager. And then that ensures that NPM gets the correct new versions of everything.
Oh, it actually kind of just builds it out.
Yeah, so the LRN Web Components repo was inspired heavily by work we saw Red Hat doing. So Red Hat had, it's now called Patternfly, but at the time it was called Relevance. And we just saw because we were starting to get a lot of assets. We were like, this is getting overwhelming. We were previously doing it in close to 200 individual Git repos.
Whoa.
Yeah. So there was only so much of that we could script. I mean, it was getting chaotic. There's, I mentioned Nikki works here and contributes to our components, but there's also two developers in another college on campus, Michael Potter and Charles Levera, and they contribute quite heavily to our portfolio as well. So then it started to get this mishmash of especially you have one element that relies on another maybe, because the whole thing with web components is they're kind of these new Lego bricks you're stacking. And it'd be Nikki getting an element that relies on something that Potter made and something I made, but she didn't pull the right versions of those other two repos. And that it just became this wonderful problem to have that, we're victims of our own success the way we were going about it. Versus now with a mono repo approach where we have it all in one place, but yet it's distributed out through NPM so other people can get it. And it's saving a lot of time.
That's huge. All right. Okay, so that's really good on web components. And then you're saying, I think HAX itself is a web component. Is that right?
Yes. So HAX is itself a web component. So
made up of a ton of smaller web components.
Yeah. So if you think of the web component standard almost as resin that you would use to build a new Lego brick, even smaller and more immaterial than what you would find in a Vue or Angular or React to make a singular thing, right? Super low level API of the browser. All the browsers have agreed on how to integrate that. So then you can actually start using those. And basically what you're doing is you're doing a class extension of the HTML element itself. That HTML element is an available class as a JavaScript, developer. And then you're extending HTML element and being like, hey, I'm making a new tag. And so instead of just paragraphs and ULs and the rest, that we can make whatever the heck we want. But so at first when you start, you obviously tick off these little teeny things, right? Like fixing a button or implementing icons in a consistent way, or making, an element that generates a list quickly or gets data from another source and presents it, in a consistent way. And then as you keep using those abstract things, baking up higher and higher and higher, you get to where HAX is, which HAX is a full-on decoupled web editing system. But the integration point for a developer is a single tag in the browser. So if you wrote, there's a code pen. I don't know if you saw it on the the hackstheweb.org site. But there's a code pen that you can go to, and you can see what the integration looks like, but it's running HAX in a code pen with a single element definition on the page.
Let me go share my screen real quick, and let's go for it. Let's just do this at web. Where is it at?
It's if you go to hackstheweb.org.
Is it present? Hold on, actually, is this? Let me present this so it sits on the screen right now. All right, so here we are. Look at that. So here we go.
So this is effectively right. So even that little thing that you closed, when you hit I accept, that I accept is a paper button web component inside of a paper toast component.
All right, let's just take a look at this real quick. All right. So here's some hacks. So here's site build. So this is looking. So this is a web component right here. It's not a body. It's not a div. It's HAX CMS site builder, right?
Yes. And so that is the web component specification, effectively giving you, hey, you can define a new tag. And then the spec is saying, like, here's the way to integrate the tag in a consistent manner. Yeah, you probably zoom that in.
All right. And you were saying that the modal, that kind of cookie pop-up was part as a paper element. That was here. Here's paper icon here, and I closed one of them. All right, I'll look at all. So actually, that's DOM module. That's a different type of web component. I haven't seen that one before.
Yeah, that's a different. It's kind of a legacy web component. It still works.
Okay,
but it's an older way of defining them that Polymer, which is a library for making web components, used. So the interesting thing with this as well.
Still like necessary these days?
It really depends on what you're trying to get out of using web components. So if it's like, I just want to scope this thing, and I'm just because another advantage of this is if you click and open one of those, you'll see it says shadow root. Yeah, do that. Yeah, that. So anytime you see the phrase shadow root, the browser is effectively walling that off from everything else.
So there's like no CSS leakage or like a cascading outside or anything. You can have target a class that's like a banner, and if there's another banner outside of this, it would not affect it.
Correct. So things inside don't leak out, and things outside don't leak in. It kind of devastates some of the more global reasons that CSS was ever used. But at the same time,
these days it's really being isolated to not be cascading for the most part.
And I mean, it's cascading, but it's cascading within this little shadow root. So if you want to think of it as if it's a new body document, I mean, it's not, but it's a similar idea. So the other neat thing with this, if you instead, if you right click in the browser and just hit view source instead of like inspecting.
Yeah.
So yeah, view page source. And so scroll down past all that. That's just kind of the head matter setup. There you go. This entire interface unpacked from that one tag down there that says HAX CMS site builder.
Site. Here's the body.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I see. So this is HAX then. This is the top level. Is that no? That's not the editor, right? This is just the site builder. Okay.
So there's HAX itself is becoming its own little ecosystem of thought. So there's HAX, which is the editing experience, and then what this site is I mean, this is a documentation site about HAX and all the projects in it, but it's built in a system called HAX CMS. So part of our thinking was like, okay, you haven't fired up HAX to illustrate why this would make sense, but if you have enough functionality in a single tag of the browser, which is the authoring experience, and it does a ton of stuff that you used to use a full-on content management system for, that you basically have completely decoupled the authoring experience into that tag, and now your backend pretty much just needs to save data blobs. So HAX CMS is presenting this design, but it's loading off of a single JSON file. And then whenever you would click to go to a different page, it's actually just loading a static HTML file. Yep, that one right there, that's site.json.
Was unmuted. So a web component appears to be able to accept. So a web component can accept configuration overrides. So if you do want to change the CSS of something, you can do that. If the web component's set up that way. So it can. Is this basically? It's Control Shift. What is it? Control Shift O? No. How do you search for? So site JSON, is that just configuration fed to the web component, and can a web component actually get its configuration from a file?
So web components allow you to, I mean, if you think of like a paragraph tag has class, right, as an attribute. Imagine you said, yeah, but I want paragraph tags to have background border or something, or like header image, that you could actually just write header hyphen image equals an image, and that the tag itself would understand that.
Yeah.
So you're allowed to define custom properties off of your
custom property.
So that's a custom property, in that case, a file. And then internal to HAX CMS Site Builder, it has logic. And this is where you asked about Polymer before, but this is where something like Polymer helps, where Polymer allows you to say like, hey, notice when file changes, and then when file changes, run this function. And so then when you run whatever that function is, you can say, oh, okay, well, I'm setting up everything. File has changed. It appears to be a valid file. Let's request that file.
So it has JavaScript running inside to detect that change. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. The web components are effectively JavaScript classes that are extending the HTML specification. And then you can stack them just like normal HTML.
And the shadow root is kind of the inside of that component. Is that right?
Yes.
And then, so there's an iron. I remember iron. I remember they had their iron is an attempt at making really high quality web components. So you got some of those in there. And inside of here somewhere, it's using that site JSON. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the internal to the definition of HAX CMS Site Builder, it understands what to do with that JSON file, which is in a specific format we wrote called JSON outline schema, to basically say like, here's the relationship between pieces of content. It's structured very similar to the way Drupal does its menu system or books, just as far as the relationships between the data. Things have parents, they have an indentation, there's a depth.
How would I find this? I'm probably getting too deep right now, but
you want to see what site JSON is?
Yeah, like I looked for the file before, and
so if you hit network, it loads it. So if you just if you do all, because you're sorting by document, and then reload the page. There it is.
It's interesting. It didn't have it in the. See it somehow. Yeah, there we go. Let me turn this off. All right, so here we have. So you guys basically took. Oh, there's a big file here. Okay. Oh wow. So this is like the configuration for the. So just stepping back, HAX, the editor itself, is just part of this. So HAX Site Builder, is that part of the HAX CMS? Oh, it is part of HAX CMS. There it is. HAX CMS Site Builder is a component of HAX CMS as a broader picture, right?
Yes, HAX CMS is, if you have an incredibly decoupled authoring system, then it's really easy to get decoupled with everything else.
And then everything revolves around site JSON. Is that like the entire configuration, the data sources, everything, right?
Effectively, yeah. Now it doesn't have all of the content of those. You see it has like location. So that's where to load that file when the state changes effectively.
Okay.
So like if you were to go and click on, if you leave that open and hit XHR, and then you click on another page, you can see it make the XHR request to the different files.
I searched for site. Let's see here. All right, so yep, I see it there. So that was just the WordPress. Yep, that was before that. It was Backdrop, CMS. Oh, so it's got these like subdirectories with the index file. So that right there, is that an actual response header? That's just GitHub. Oh, okay. That's just a GitHub Pages account. It's not actually like a live CMS then.
Yeah. So HAX CMS currently is set up that you would like run it locally in a Docker container or whatever, and then you can do publishing workflows where you just hit publish and it'll send it up to a GitHub account and it'll do GitHub Pages publishing.
Oh wow!
So this
fully decoupled, like you just can like I should fully headless.
Yeah. So like those, you see those little pink tools in the top right there?
Yeah.
So that is what you would see. There's my Bowser image. That's what you would see if you were the site owner. Now, if you saw in that initial index.html when you tried to find the body tag, there was like a little snippet that just said like demo mode or something. If you go to the view source one.
Right here?
Well, yeah, that is what's powering it. But if you go to the view source tab that you have there, the third tab over, yeah. See how there's a window.HAX CMS context demo?
Yeah.
So what HAX CMS is doing via this tag is that tag goes, it loads the instructions, and it's booting up, and it says, what is my current context? Like, is there a backend to save to? And like, is this person logged in? And so in that context setup, it basically has a, hey, if something claims that this is a demo, skip all the checks and just supply, supply the editor, knowing that this won't save anywhere, right? Like those app settings, those aren't real paths. They're not going to do anything. It's on GitHub Pages.
Okay.
But when you're working locally in like a DDev container, which is what I like to use for mine, that same exact code, like I don't change anything versus what you're seeing right there, like live. And that spin up goes, oh, I noticed there's a JSON web token. And so do you think I have a PHP backend right now? And then it fires a request for what would be the PHP backend web component file. And if it finds it, the PHP backend web component file is injecting the equivalent of that window.app settings, except they're specific to the routing to talk to HAX CMS backend.
Hold on, I got lost there. All right, let's break that down. So
I need to drive soon because it gets pretty.
Yeah, oh yeah, let's do that.
It gets pretty deep on the.
Let's do that
on this thing.
Right, you go ahead and drive, and I'll make you presenter.
Yeah, how do I do that? Screen. Hold on, let me.
Oh, it's on the top left for me in that green square.
Yeah, I'm just making sure I have the tabs on the right window here.
Okay.
Alrighty.
I hadn't used this feature in a while. It took me a while to find it.
There we go. All right, so I got that screen open. Let's extend that or whatever. Why couldn't I click that side? I don't know why it won't let me make this bigger. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So yeah, so that's that little mini site, right? And I can click through, go to different pages, and everything on here is a web component, other than just like text. But this is what HAX CMS looks like. Like I'm running this in a DDev Docker container here. So I'll just refresh. Oh, I shut it off.
So it's just HAX CMS out of the box. That's right?
Mm-hmm. So I'll do DDev start.
Download.
Not connected Docker. Oh, it'd be nice if I didn't shut off Docker before this presentation. Hold on, let me go turn on Docker. I was running. We were talking about coffee before we started. I was running low on power at a coffee shop. I was like, no, I need to write this thing before it run out of power. And the easiest way to save power on a Mac is to shut off Docker. So we'll wait for Docker to open up there. But
so this is your massive web component repo there, okay?
So this is our organization for we've for Elm's Learning Network. Elm's Learning Network, if you know us from a Drupal context, is like an actual platform that you can build on, but it's kind of becoming more of this like just holistic organization that does these things like under the same umbrella. So where's the, there it is, LRM Web Components, yeah, like you mentioned. So that is the mono repo that has all of our elements. So if I go to this and I hit elements, these are all the elements that we've been working on. And so
wow,
we got elements for you know, all kind of like, here's a Wikipedia query. So that's going to show a post, a piece of content from Wikipedia just from a search term. Although, you know, we're kind of all over the place with these web components. So, you know, I have HAX, which is a full-on editor. I have a to-do list.
So the HAX, so you scroll up there real quick into the HAX section there. So you should have a HAX CMS web component then, is that right? Oh, yeah. Inside there. Okay.
So this is HAX CMS Elements. So HAX CMS Elements is actually a whole bunch of web components. So
is this the top level like HAX CMS then, or is that's what I guess I'm trying to mentally picture here?
I got you. So the that was Site Builder.
Site Builder is the one. Okay, and then okay, yep, that's the one we saw.
So this is, you know, a more sophisticated web component. I mean, nobody starts at this one, right? Like we started at buttons and things like that and worked our way up. Yeah. But they all generally look like this. You're going to have like import statements. So in the case you mentioned that Iron Ajax tag. So to leverage the Iron Ajax tag, I import it. And now I can place it in the DOM.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's Iron Ajax. So then the workflow ends up becoming a lot of like, go to webcomponents.org, search for a use case, say Ajax, and I happen to know Iron Ajax kicks butt. So I can look at the docs on this site, see, oh, hey, this is our example of how to use this.
Nice.
Then, and this is because you asked like about Polymer before, this is where there's a huge point of confusion around web components and Polymer. So web components is getting you the shadow DOM with the style scoping, the connotation that you can even write a custom element tag, right? Like thing-thing, a template tag, which allows you to, it just makes everything bootstrap correctly. And then the JS modules, like all this import syntax stuff that's actually able to get these definitions on the page. What Polymer's getting you is things like this properties decorator.
Okay.
So that's a fancy word that I just learned. So, I mean, I've been doing these for 2 years, and I think for the first time used the phrase properties decorator appropriately. But so you could, you know, when you're creating a web component, use like a vanilla JS approach, and it's not going to have a connotation of properties. Like you're going to have to tell it, oh, hey, I've got, you know, like this dot loading equals whatever. And then you're going to have to teach it that it's a Boolean. You're going to have to teach it different aspects. So Polymer's kind of just like giving you a bunch of conventions that make web components super usable. And it's not that you have to use Polymer. In fact, like the Polymer development team now works on a project called Lit Element that just went full release like 2 days ago.
What's it called?
Lit Element, L-I-T.
Okay.
And the two, like the major misunderstanding around web components is, so someone said, oh, you're using Polymer 3. This is a Polymer 3 based element. And then Lit Element comes out and they said, oh, so is that Polymer 4? And it's like, well, no, it's a different project. So I have to migrate everything? No. Well, can I use it? Yeah. So all of the different libraries for web components, and there's like 5 or 6 popular ones right now, they're all compatible at a data layer, and they all leverage the same, you know, underlying 4-part specification, so that then I can take a Polymer element and in the top of my document for a Lit element, mix that Polymer element into the Lit element. And now there's going to be some different conventions as far as like data binding and getting stuff to present in the page. Like for example, these double braces.
So this is like basically an implementation of web components that is still following the specifications, but it's just it's doing its own thing, and it's part of the spec.
Yeah, basically every web components library that is on top of the spec is going to have some connotation of data binding, like take that property and then actually print that value into the DOM.
And so that is supported, data binding is supported with web components by itself, but this is just easier ways to do it, or more powerful ways.
Yeah, so data binding in web components itself would be like document.getElementID, the element name, dot loading equals, and then reference some other thing, get ID, dot whatever to set it to that, right? So yeah, it's like a convention type of a thing.
Okay.
Excuse me. Huh. So this right here with Iron Ajax, for example, is able to take that. What were we looking at? It was like file, wasn't it? File. There we go. File. So let's trace file, right? Because you were trying to find where site.json comes into play. So there's so this is where, like in the DOM, right there, you saw site.json. And then what happens is, if you imagine this element is attached to the page, and then Polymer lets you say, hey, observe changes to file. So when file changes, run this function. And then when I run the function, it gives me the new value and the old value.
How did it know that that was the file to watch there?
Which, this?
Yeah, like it says up top location. Oh, because when you pass a file in, it passes that property.
Correct.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, so this is just my comment doc block for it.
And file was just an arbitrary name you made up. It could have been actual JSON _ file.
Yep. Something. See, like this is base URI, active item content. The only thing is that because these are JavaScript properties, they can't have like hyphens in them. They can have underscores. So you plug in file.
Yeah.
And then you know file's going to change. So then I can say, okay, well, type of, right? And I say new value, which this is new value, old value. If we have a new value, this is a nice little convention Polymer gives you, this $sign. So what this is doing is effectively bookmarking. It's the equivalent of document.getElementById. However, document.getElementById can't walk into shadow roots.
Oh.
So it's part of the scoping. Same with the CSS scoping. You can't select things in that shadow root natively. You have to like traverse the objects. So
yeah, it's kind of hidden. It's kind of outside that scope.
Yes. So in order to do that, and honestly, like a lot of Polymer initially being created was kind of this chicken and egg scenario of like, we need browsers to adopt a web component spec. Well, we need people to start writing code to justify adoption. And so Polymer created all these conventions to try and make it easier to get into this space. This is the equivalent of saying like this dot, I think it's shadow root dot get element by ID manifest.
Oh, wow, that's deep. Yeah, okay.
So then what I can do is I can trace manifest. And so I can search for ID equals manifest. And we see manifest is a URL built out of the location of the outline, which is a global of some kind, right? You probably didn't see that value used, but it's just in case it's a nested request. And then the file, right? So then you're going to have site.json there. And then I use a timestamp to try and help with like cache engines to ensure that I actually get a fresh copy. I don't know that I'll actually need that long term. So then inside of that manifest, you see it says generate request. Well, the reason I know generate request is a real call is because I went to the Iron Ajax documentation. I clicked Iron Ajax. And then I could search for, in this case, generate request. And so what generate request in Iron Ajax does that's so useful is if I go to where that request was, there we go. This is the equivalent of saying, this is the address to request data from. Go get that data, handle the response as JSON, wait 250 milliseconds before you actually issue the request in case like something has changed ahead of time, like a timestamp. And then this last hyphen response is effectively where the data response is. And so That data response, then, you see these braces are different. They're the curly brackets instead of normal brackets.
Okay.
So in Polymer, this is the equivalent of saying two-way data binding. And so in Iron Ajax, when Iron Ajax goes and does its thing, imagine that the response from that file that site.json is going to be binded into last response on their side. But in my local development, in this element, manifest is going to get updated with whatever data came across from that address.
The manifest element?
It's a property.
A property. What's the example? I'm missing the example here. I might have missed that. So the manifest, oh, because the web manifest, you mean?
Well, so this is an additional property inside of this element. We're still operating in the same element here.
Okay.
So this site builder element, I've gone from...
We're outside of Iron Ajax now. Got it.
Yes, Iron Ajax with the curly brace says, hey, whenever you update your value here, I want you to update this value here.
Okay. And sorry, just to clarify, is this an actual like web manifest, or is this a
no? This is just a property name that I'm using inside of the HAX CMS site builder tag.
Got it. So you have HAX has its own manifest file.
Yes, in this case, I'm saying, hey, that file that you loaded, right? I want you to give me that as a variable locally called manifest.
Okay. And this is all related to site.json, right?
Yes. So imagine that content of site.json with that little equation of like, notice the location has changed, generate a request against the file, that those 2 steps we talked through, that the data of that file is going to show up and be available in this manifest variable.
Okay, so site.json changes from time to time, or, I guess it polls. Does it like pull out and check for changes every now and then, or is this just on a reload?
So that's going to be on a reload.
Okay.
Part of the workflow with HAX CMS is that it's basically a static site sitting out there. So if you think of it as like, it is dynamic when it's local to you, but then you hit publish and it makes it static and throws it out to GitHub, but it's using all the same elements.
Okay. So GitHub is its data source for this purpose.
Well, it's saving data to GitHub. Let me go to the actual.
This is very interesting. So like,
you picked like one of the crazier like use cases of what we've made the last few years, but that's fine.
So
so
it can like actually make Git commits to like, that's what I'm confused about.
Yeah, HAX CMS automatically commits to version control.
Even so, it's a headless CMS that can use a JSON web token to commit content to a Git repository. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So here's on my computer. This is hackstheweb.org, the files, right? So you see, there's commits here and things, and so I'll make a change because now my Docker thing is running. So I'm going to do ddev start. All right. So this is HAX CMS running locally on my computer. Hopefully it won't get mad. Sometimes this gets mad when I turn the container on and off. I think I fixed the issue, but we'll see in a second.
Yeah.
Creating the router. It's thinking about it. There we go. Yay, some messages. Okay. So then I'm going to copy this address. And then my site will appear here. Okay, so
you're local.
I'm local, right? So I'm at a local address. And this is kind of a HAX CMS is like a microsite generator manager platform.
Okay, that's a good term. That's
okay. So have you used Jekyll before?
I haven't, but I used Gatsby to build my site the other day, so maybe that's similar. I don't know.
Okay, yeah. So there are some similar concepts there, right? So I'm gonna make sure that I'm actually logged in here. So this is.
So is that login right there tied to this JSON web token?
That just made a request to a PHP backend and said, "Hey, admin matches, this user hash," and so now here's a JWT.
A what?
A JWT.
Ah, okay. So that's how you get a specific JWT that authorizes you to do certain things.
Yes. So what I'm accessing here is so if you imagine that Docker container is running right here. This is the the file structure involved. And then I will bring this up in VS Code. All right. Let me get rid of those. This doesn't matter. So,
all right. So, okay. So there is like this initial handshake with the JSON Web Token, the JWT, that you do have an actual backend. It could be a Lambda, I suppose. Doesn't need to be a full server running.
Correct.
I think you're probably already playing with this, it sounds like, with that.
So what we've tried to do is basically say, like, okay, if you imagine all my authoring is able to be boiled up into a single tag, right? So now I can assume authoring of CMS. And then if I use the same technology for my authoring for my front end rendering, I can kind of scale my capabilities because I don't have two separate teams here for front end and back end development, if you will.
Okay.
That really all that's happening, you saw that file load. It's just loading a static file, and then it's presenting other static files. So
based on the route that
yes, based on the route. So this, in its current implementation, has a PHP backend, but it's so minimal that what you experienced with the Beaker browser, that was just, and I said, were you able to do make editable copy and start editing?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's happening there is that the same exact tag structure, it boots up in
Can you show that real quick? Is that a fast thing?
in Beaker? Yeah, hopefully it won't, collapse the.
Okay.
It won't collapse the internet or anything because these DAT URLs are a little heavy sometimes. So this is Beaker browser, and I'm going to put in this DAT address that I know that exists.
Yeah. So this is what started this kind of journey that we're here today. This is a decentralized URL, and this server, I don't know where it is, but
so this address, if you were to go to it right now, is served up directly from my computer.
Oh, so if your computer's not on, it doesn't work.
Correct. So it's legit decentralized, peer-to-peer.
Where's the centralized DNS for it though?
There isn't one.
How does it look up that to your IP?
You can get in the weeds pretty fast with Beaker, but you can get into the Beaker website. I mean, like, I don't understand how any of that stuff works. But
okay, I think I got it now. When you start it up, you can basically advertise a URL. If it's not taken, it'll advertise it. So there is some kind of a central.
Yes. So they do have. So if I was to make an editable copy of this, just to make the universe even more ridiculous, what it's doing is it's creating files on my local file system and then generating a brand new DAT address, which is this huge hash.
Then that is advertised to the whole decentralized network.
Yes. So now if you plugged in this hash value, you would get my, in this case, it's just a blank page at the moment. You would get this blank page seeded from me. So it's almost like you take the Bitcoin addressing system, but you just say, hey, this file on my computer is that address.
Okay.
And now that number is so big and unique that it's more or less security through obscurity, right? Like no one's going to ever guess that exists. So if I send that address to you, I don't understand how their peer-to-peer spider works, but I mean, it's able to more or less sniff that out and then pull it back in. Like I think it operates a lot more like the Tor network, which again, I also don't fully comprehend.
So that's great. Like it basically is decentralized in that way, but there's some kind of a central like Beaker initial node that people contact to get all the peer-to-peer thing going on, I'm guessing.
I mean, I don't know that there is. Like, I think it's just sending out over this DAT protocol, and then because the reason I think it's not is that if you're on certain networks, this will heavily saturate network traffic.
Oh, so it's okay.
So it's almost like it's just if you plug in this address, it's almost like it's just saturating everything it possibly can in an attempt to find this until someone responds and says, "Oh, hey, yeah, I actually that's me."
So okay, so there's probably thousands of requests coming to you, also then possibly.
Possibly, yeah.
for random other things that don't exist, and you're like, well, I don't have it, and they go to the next one.
That is, yes, I think that's what's happening. But the Beaker browser people have, like, they do some weekly video, ask me anything types of things. So that is kind of like, I mean, that might not actually be accurate, but I believe that's what's going on.
Okay. And so the initial thing you were going to show me with this, I forgot what that was, but we can get that. You were saying like make a copy and.
So I've got this site, but this site is a exact replica of the hackstheweb.org site that you're accessing.
Gotcha.
It's not like a fork of it or anything. Like, it is the exact code base. But if you load that code base, which is a statically generated site, if you load it in Beaker, the engine that sets up in HAX CMS to figure out, like, do I have a backend? Like, it's trying to answer that question during its bootstrap of that tag. Like, do I have a backend? One of the checks it does is for this global class object called a DAT archive, which is only available in Beaker browser.
So there's an API that it can check the DAT archive.
Yes. So Beaker has this built-in class called DAT archive. So during my bootstrap process, I can say, does the class DAT archive exist? And then part of that class archive. So if it does, I go, okay, then I know I have a potential backend. It's called Beaker. And then
wait a minute. So the backend is Beaker.
The backend is the browser itself for serving this website.
Because it can store content somehow in the peer-to-peer, like.
So this file, even though it has this nicer looking address, this is resolving to my file system. So if you request this, you get the files from me. Those files are the same files that are on GitHub right now, right? So I've just taken a copy of them.
Okay. So your browser, your local is the backend in a sense. Beaker.
Effectively, yeah. So Beaker has a class API that says, like, basically leveraging your public-private key share. Like, that's what these addresses equate to. And so if you're able to unlock the key as to what that hash is, it knows you own the file. So if you own the file, then the API allows you to edit the files directly on the file system. And so then HAX CMS just leverages that class object to write the files directly. So it's a backendless CMS.
Wow. This is
in that context, right? So in the context where you have this site. Now, this site didn't come out of thin air, right? So I used a HAX CMS instance running on my computer. I'll go back to that. So, I would say new site, and we'd say live stream. Put in a description or whatever, pick like a color, which we only sort of use currently, maybe select an icon, and then say whether it's a blog or our documentation site. So I'll do documentation site. I'll have to refresh. We're still working on a lot of state management issues. If you can imagine, this is pretty trippy stuff.
Yeah.
So that created, this is reading off a file and says, hey, there's a little site called Livestream. But what that did on the file system, when I ran through that, is it does talk to some PHP files, and then it goes into this _sites directory, and it leverages this little JSON object, and it says, where is it? This should be the last one. There we go. It says, hey, there's a thing called live stream, right? Like, there's the information is put in, but it writes it to this JSON file. So this file is what is presenting this board of material.
All right, and that's from your local.
This is all local. Yeah, all local.
Okay.
And then it also goes into, as part of that, tapping the PHP backend, PHP goes into this boilerplate directory and hits site, and then it copies all these files, which are like, this is a starting point for a brand new site. If you think like in a Jekyll context, right, you're going to run like an init command and get that boilerplate of what to work on. So this is effectively just copying all the files there, and then
PHP will then copy them on the server side.
Yeah, so that's happening server side.
Okay.
So it's been told, like, hey, make a new site. It runs through some classes, and it copies those files, creates a reference to it so that you can, click to get to it. And then it creates in this case, live stream folder. Now, if I take that live stream folder and I'm going to throw it in GitHub, you'll see that it has automatically created a Git repository, and then it's checked all the files into it.
So how did this part work right here? So it's using a GitHub web token, but GitHub site, is it GitHub site builder, or I don't know what it is. It's not using like another tool at middle layer. It's using GitHub, right?
Oh, sorry, no. So this is the GitHub GUI. So this is just visualizing the repo on my local file system.
Okay, but how did that make Git commits?
There's a PHP library called Git PHP.
Okay, so it went back to the back end, and the back it didn't do it from the browser to Git with the JSON.
Correct.
Okay, all right. This is making more sense then.
All right, so these files were all copied, right? They're just copied from somewhere else as like, here's the starting point.
Okay.
And then it put them in version control. And then if I go to live stream and I hit access site, it's going to take me to the physical file location
that it just created.
Git. Right, so that is the equivalent of this index.html file here, right? Like I have underscore sites, live stream, index.html.
Just a single web component inside of it.
And that page just has a single web component inside of it, absolutely. HAX CMS site builder.
But the site JSON is different.
Correct. So it has created a boilerplate starting point for a new site JSON.
Wow, okay.
So now I want to edit that site JSON, and I'll inspect, because unless you see the network transactions, this starts to get admittedly pretty confusing what's happening. So I'm on a page, right? And this kind of looks like the boilerplate of where hackstheweb.org is, right? Yeah. So the first thing we get with a new HAX CMS site is just a new page and the fact that this shows up at all. But you see at the bottom right corner that I'm logged in. Now, to prove that this actually is not pervasive, if I go over to like Firefox and I access that same address, hopefully it won't show me logged in. That would be annoying. Come on. There we go. So this is the same exact address, but in Firefox, just another browser I have open.
Yeah.
Note, I don't have login, right? Now, if I were to go to that little microsite manager overview page, come on thing. I'm on Firefox. Firefox gets mad at me because we're doing some heavy development right around this. I might have to actually switch to Safari. Safari, where are you?
Just barged on rendering the page, it looks like.
Yeah, I just got mad there. We've been, in pretty heavy development here. Okay, so in Safari, page is here, nothing in there. And then I'll go to overview dashboard. Go. And I'll hit login. It'll say, hey, log in, and on my incredibly serious admin username password. Now that has generated a JSON web token that I now have. And so now when I go over to this live stream page and I hit refresh, nothing will happen, and then I'll be like, are you kidding me? It's supposed to be aware of my JSON web token. So, oh, there it is. Okay, I get into some, the ddev Docker container runs Nginx. So I get into some like caching errors where it just tries to skip ahead really quickly. So what happened is the same site as it's booting up goes, oh, I found a JWT and it's valid. And so I can give you an authoring experience. And so it injects the authoring experience at runtime.
The JWT authenticates with the PHP backend to trigger that, or?
Yes. But it authenticated with a PHP backend by just accessing a variable and saying, hey, go check this route or path or whatever. So we could pretty easily make this work with like Node. Like we're not tied to PHP in any way. I just happen to have built a lot of classes in PHP.
Or a Lambda function that.
Or a Lambda function, or maybe that JWT comes from there's web components on webcomponents.org that talk to Firebase, and Firebase is a Google thing that'll log you in to to Twitter.
Oh, or Firebase login, yeah.
Yeah, it'll authorize you to Facebook or Twitter or any of the OAuth providers that are common.
Oh, I think I know. Yeah, I think I've actually played with that once.
So let's go. All right. So I'm on my page. Does this make sense what it is that I have here and I'm editing?
Yeah, so far.
All right. So then I want to edit this. I hit the edit pencil, and now I have HAX. And HAX is kind of a like Gutenberg-esque editing experience. So I could take that text and bold it or whatever. I could insert a header. And the whole time what I'm doing is you hit view source here. I'm just writing HTML.
Yeah.
So this is visualizing what's there. The fun thing for, like trippy inception web development is, does this editor look familiar?
Huh, good. I don't recognize the editor actually, but maybe it's because I don't use like Atom or one of those. So
which one do you use?
I use IntelliJ.
Oh, okay. So this is Monaco editor in high contrast mode. And Monaco editor is the editor VS Code uses.
Oh, VS Code. I haven't tried that one yet. Okay, got it.
So the fun thing when you go down this this warp hole of web components, this isn't like the VS Code editor. It is literally the VS Code editor.
Wow.
Because VS Code is written in Electron, and Electron allows you to write web apps, but for desktop, and then it compiles them. So you can actually go and get the node module for the Monaco editor and then put it into a web component. And so this is a web component that gives you the Monaco editor with all the accessibility enhancements, with code autocompletes. Like if I start typing a strong tag.
What? Oh, that's deep.
Right, like it would know that that's broken. If I had like JSON in there, I could potentially say, oh, that's busted, right? This is all the same autocompletes you would get from there. And it has even the mini map over here. So like if I were to take this, right,
you can you can drag up and down. Yeah, that's not functionality you would just write for fun.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, that took a lot of work. And we get to reuse that with web components.
Yes.
And did you do the extraction on this, or is this some community project like that did that?
So I mean,
I shouldn't say extraction. I should like basically say like packaging of it.
So Microsoft has it as a standalone library, and then someone else packaged it into like a Monaco-editor tag, and then I packaged that into a code-editor tag and did some additional data binding and things around it.
Oh, so you can just pull these web components in multiple times with customizations on top of them.
Yeah, so you can stack web components just like you can stack normal HTML, and then effectively, like if I inspect the shadow root of my code editor,
a bunch of nested shadow roots. Yeah.
Yep. So I get into a wrapper, and there's a code-editor which has a shadow root.
That's the one, right?
And there's Monaco editor down in there.
So then Monaco has its own shadow, and then okay, got it. Yeah.
Yep. And then everybody can just keep cascading.
Okay. Wow, that's deep. All right. So HAX has this like really nice experience with a massive functionality because you can just pull in all these web components. It's going to keep getting better too.
Correct. So like if I want to go make something, what I'm making is I'm just writing HTML, but my HTML is web components. So this entire board is web components. The button's a web component. If I wanted to do I mentioned Wikipedia before. Let's search Wikipedia. So I made an element called Wikipedia-element. I select it, and then I get this preview pane, and I have an input form over here, and I have Wikipedia here. So adding to trippy levels of trippy, this form is a web component that knows how to render a specification called JSON schema. And so HAX doesn't understand what a Wikipedia element is. The Wikipedia element is supplying at runtime the definition of how to edit itself to HAX.
Wow. Okay.
So the Wikipedia element has this JSON schema inside of it that says, because if it's a web component, right, we've got all the containerization and we've effectively got this little API of like, here's how to talk to this.
This web component.
Yes, this one specific web component. So then in this case, it's like search is, Wikipedia element has a search term. And then the JSON schema bubbles up when this is attached to the DOM initially as HAX is bootstrapping and says, hey, HAX, if the user wants to create or edit one of these, I've got a search term and it's a text input field and the default value should be Polymer library like this. So then I can, which then the form, because everything's a web component is a web component is a web component. The form itself is made up of paper input container, which is made of paper input, which is made of this thing called eco-JSON schema, which it takes a JSON schema object and converts it into a form on the fly. So we have headless form rendering, which like this beats the pants off of like the Drupal form API as far as lack of need for complexity. I mean, just because if you think of those like render arrays that you're doing in Drupal forever to get like a text field. Yeah. You're kind of skipping all of that because the JSON schema is allowed to say like, hey, I've got a string and I need you to use a paper -text area to render me. Yeah. So then using two-way data binding, right? So if this is a little preview area, I can say Drupal, and that just made an AJAX call to Wikipedia, pulled in the Drupal article, and then leveraged another web component to semantically accurately cite the Wikipedia article.
Wow. Okay. And you can take that and you can put it into your content.
So then I hit update, puts it in the page. HAX goes, hey, I know who you are. You're a Wikipedia article. Fundamentally, what's happening in the DOM is it's just writing Wikipedia-query and then show title. Hey, search equals Drupal.
Wow. And that resource ID is on Wikipedia's side, right?
Yeah, this search is Drupal's. Well, the resource ID is something that was dynamically generated on this side. So you can kind of start mixing this with like RDF metadata tagging structure if you really want to. We explore a little bit of that with a specification called OER schema, which is more education centric, but like we wire it into our stuff, into our shadow roots automatically. So that like in the case of this Wikipedia query, if I were to inspect the Wikipedia query.
So that search was just the first result for Drupal. It just took the first result. Then.
Correct, because that's what this tag does, is it just does a direct content search against Wikipedia.
Okay.
And then in the shadow root, I can have, whatever metadata I want. But it's not bound to, like a Wikipedia query, right? Because it's whatever we want it to be. So like if I wanted to make a license or I wanted to make a video player or whatever, but because we're treating the whole front end as an API, I have this find button. And the find button is using JSON in order to dynamically search these other places to get data from them. So like if I want to find a video on YouTube, I select YouTube, and then I'll search for ElmsLN, right? Okay. So that queried Wikipedia, or sorry, that queried YouTube using the YouTube API, and it does have my credential, like there's like a key so that you can do searches like this.
Because otherwise they either block or get so many free ones per day.
Yeah, exactly. So so this went and queried that endpoint. The JSON that came back, it then walked through and it started to build out these little cards off of that API data. And then
all web component cards then.
Correct. So those are all web component cards visualizing data that came from YouTube. And then when I select one, what's happening, because again, like HAX doesn't understand YouTube. HAX has been given a definition of like, here's how to search a thing, and that thing is called YouTube, and it'll return data in this format. So like this entire search area is system agnostic. It's just the initial directions that come in, which are, it's a pretty big direction set, but the initial directions that come in provide all of the information required to build a system agnostic search.
But that itself is a web component.
Correct.
And is that an Elm's web component that you guys created, or is that like a?
Yeah, we made that as part of HAX to be able to do this whole form. But it could be built out of any number of elements that we leverage from webcomponents.org.
Wow. All right.
So then when I click on a video, part of what this whole find process does is the YouTube search engine in this, or search like app as we call it in this, like it's an application. The YouTube search says, hey, you can get my data to be visualized like this, like as far as data structure. And then when you select something, I'm going to give you a video, and that video is going to have a source and a title or whatever. And then HAX kind of queries itself and it says, okay, what elements when we set up everything said, hey, here's my JSON schema form. And oh, by the way, I'm able to present video. So these two tags that we've made said, I know how to handle video, which means if you were to implement HAX into your Drupal site and you said, I don't like your video player, or I don't use a QR code, you could just not include the QR code and this option wouldn't even come up. Or you could include another video player and it would show up next to our video player. Or you could remove our video player and call it something else. Like there's a level of remix to this that's a little absurd. But so when I select video player, what happened is it pulled that source off of the API and then mapped it correctly to this video player field, which is JSON schema. So it's just pre-populating the values. And then it built this form because the element said, hey, I have an accent color, and the accent color thing is going to be needing a color picker element, and I need a checkbox toggle. And so what you're seeing here is like two-way data binding between the way something would be assembled and then the preview of it. But we're using other web components to present the options by which we actually go about using that data. So when I switch it to Amber, it's changed it to Amber in there.
Just all wired together.
I do pink, it's pink. This is my title, right? So that I could write what the title is and be like, I don't really like that. Let's do cyan, and the player's cyan, or I do dark theme. And so we've invested a lot in, like, Nikki worked on both of these aspects pretty heavily. The accessibility of that operation right there, so that there is appropriate WCAG color contrast at every step of this without anyone knowing what those concepts are.
Yeah.
So like if I make this amber, then I'm guaranteed that there's appropriate color contrast. You like see how that's a lighter amber, but then when I switch it to this, it's that muddy one.
Yeah.
Down to that level.
Wow. And that's all in that logic is in the web component, and it just takes care of it.
That logic's in the web component. The colors, because you can pierce the shadow roots, but you do it with intentionality. So the way that those colors become normalized across things is through like CSS variables.
Yeah.
And so Nikki made these really elegant CSS variables that we can use everywhere. Then the video player tag is automatically responsive, and I can change the size or whatever. Now I hit save.
Yeah, so here's the yeah. So you save it, and it saves it to that file system, makes a git commit, right?
Yes, so I hit save, and what that ended up doing is it well, let's do the GitHub one. There we go. So it made a commit, and there's the contents in that one file.
Oh.
And then it updated site.json to give like a little description thing, right? That's like your first 200 characters or whatever, and then updated the updated time.
So when you saved it, it sent a request back to PHP.
Correct.
Okay.
So
and that was just JSON schema then?
That request in that case, I'm gonna have to do another one.
I guess it doesn't matter, but I mean, it's probably just HTML. It's like it's just straight up.
Add a new page. So there's create page.php, which sent a JSON. This is a format we call JSON outline schema. So it sent a JSON outline schema item to the back end.
Is that a post? Can you go to headers real quick and see if that's post? request. Is it sorry, go to request headers. General post. Okay, so it's a post with a post body. The post body has that in there.
Yep.
And that's JSON schema.
So this right here is just JSON in this instance.
Okay.
Right. So like in the request payload here, you can see my JWAT and location and title.
JWAT. Yeah, that's what you're calling it. Yes. JWAT together. Okay. So that's just JSON in there, and then your HTML is bundled inside of there, right?
Yeah. So the call that I just made in this case was to create a new page, and so I have to hit refresh because there's a state issue with the add button right now. But so that created this new page in the outline, which then related to another page being created on the back end.
Yeah. Oh, there's the site JSON then. Okay. So it. Can you go back to? Can you just go back to that network request real quick?
Yeah.
And then
so here I'll edit this one. So I'll load that one, edit. Let's find something on Wikipedia, and in this case we'll search for Drupal, and it'll return multiple results. Hey, Drupal Commerce, that's cool. All right, so there's an article about Drupal Commerce. Save, and then there's save page. There we go. There's body.
In there. Your body, there's the HTML. Yeah, so you have a body, which is HTML. Yeah, those are all the those are all the web components, really.
Yep, it's the contents of what it's going to ship is what you can see in view source or source view.
And it's just so nicely laid out that people don't have to worry about what HTML anymore. And as opposed to like CK editor, which can get pretty hairy at sometimes with things, this is more like structured content. And easily drag aroundable because everything's in a self-contained web component.
Yes.
And I guess CK editors, probably going to do something like this at some point. With web
this is sort of what like WordPress is attempting to do with Gutenberg.
Okay.
But so Gutenberg's has this concept of blocks, and so that each thing you put in the page is a block.
Yeah.
And then blocks have certain properties as to how you edit them. It's similar in concept, except one, you have to write them in React, which is, it's React. I don't love React, but that's a different story. Whereas HAX is able to edit anything that is a web component. So like I could integrate HAX with lit element, or I could integrate HAX with a vanilla JS element.
Yeah.
Just by implementing the schema and firing the right event effectively.
And it's just all a single stream of HTML for this particular case.
Correct.
And it can take that source HTML, and as long as it's valid HTML and the right web components and everything. So, but then something has to like discover all the web components. Like if somebody adds a new web component, can you add a web component that's not in the library here?
Yeah, you have to go through like a build step basically to get it in there. Like what's happening is that HAX has this auto loader like area in its initial, like the way it sets itself up, and that says like, hey, take all of these tags and just throw them on the DOM and load their definitions so that we can understand them for HAX's purposes. So there is like Polymer or build steps involved in that, right? So like this is all powered by a package JSON.
Okay, and those are all in there.
Yes, and so like these are, like there's the QR element, there's placeholder and PDF and testimonial and video player. And so HAX is not dependent upon those, but like this is, such a trippy different way of doing business that like, unless we show a ton of examples, people are going to be like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah. They're huge.
But you're not actually tied to our elements. Like you can, if I took out the stuff in the code pen, I could run HAX with just like a code view and like iframes and paragraph tags.
Oh, so yeah. So I'm sorry. Where's the code pen? We started there and we never got there.
So if I go to hackstheweb.org, and then I think it's under integrations. There we go. So under integrations, there's something a little bit more crazy, and it says CodePen. And if I go to the CodePen, so the web components are loaded over a CDN, and then this is all that's on the interface is this HAX tag and the guts of what you want to edit. But over here, this is called, in HAX, this is the App Store specification. And so it's basically the rules by which HAX is governed. So like there's YouTube with its with YouTube integration, Vimeo, which is just a big old JSON blob.
Hold on, the App Store of HAX Store?
So HAX has this, in the hackstheweb.org site, under documentation and development, there's HAX App Store.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like it's a specification that we made that's like, hey, do you want to make apps for HAX, which is an app in our case is anything you do CRUD operators with. Okay. So if you want to search YouTube, right, like this is the way that you provide connection details as to how to search a thing.
Mm.
So this also allows us to get to one of our, bridge points with systems that exist currently. So like say I want to upload a file, I need a backend of some kind, right? And I need to be able to talk to that. So one of the apps in the app specification is like, well, hey, how do you add stuff to this? And so in HAX CMS, it's provided the wiring of like, hey, here's this endpoint so that you can do a post of an image or whatever. And so there's that image of me that I can throw on the page and hit save. Which then, imagine it's Drupal because we have Drupal 6, 7, and 8 integration. We have Backdrop integration. We have WordPress integration. We have Grab CMS integration. All those have to do. What?
Those are all apps.
Those are like the integration point.
Okay.
So the way, but then if you're in a Drupal site, then it's the part of the Drupal integration, like why there bothers to be a Drupal module at all, is that it's going to be serving up to HAX, hey, here's the endpoint for uploading files.
Yeah, so it's basically like Drupal 8 has the REST WS built in or something now. Has REST endpoints built in, and Drupal has those specific points and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. So then it's leveraging one of those basically.
Okay. Wow. This is deep.
Yay, man! You asked for.
Yeah, this is good.
You asked for said whatever's going on. So I mean, this is my general development workflow for working on the hackstheweb.org site. When I want to update documentation, I use HAX CMS. I edit pages. I add new stuff. HAX CMS has an outlining tool, so I can hit outline here, make new things really fast.
The only thing that you need to do is really just issue a JSON web token that the server that allows, right?
Yep.
And then so when you do the Drupal integration, let's just say, does Drupal actually issue the web token, the JWT?
In the case of Drupal, I'm just kind of doing it the way that CodePen does, where I implement. If you imagine like the H, so in that CodePen, there's an H-A-X tag.
Yep.
That is one way of integrating HAX into the browser, like to teach the browser about it. So there's also like a WYSIWYG -HAX tag, and there's like a CMS -HAX tag. So there's like different ways of getting that initial integration bridged. So the way that Drupal does it is it prints down a CMS -HAX tag, and then in Drupal it creates a new tab off of the node, which is like HAX mode, and then you hit that button and it gives you the HAX editor. So in that case, it's like, well, if you can access this page,
you don't use it like this. You use it as a tab in that, like in the Drupal interface.
Yeah, in that context, it's almost more like a WYSIWYG on a different page. I mean, I can show you if you want.
Sure.
So do pdev start on Drupal 8, and while we're at it, we'll do WordPress. Start that one up. And so this Yahoo, whoops, if I'd actually paste. Oh, it went there, okay. All right, so I'll log into Drupal 8. Hopefully I know how to log into this. Hey, thank goodness. All right, so there's Drupal 8. So this has the HAX module. And then, so there's my content on a page, right? Because these are web components.
Yeah.
That's another really important concept with HAX is that versus like Gutenberg. So the Gutenberg blocks that you make are pretty darn specific to WordPress and Gutenberg at that point. Like you've basically created a visual asset for modification in the context of WordPress. And what we're saying that's so radically different is create your visual asset first and then teach the editor how to modify it. Does that make sense as far as differentiation?
Yeah, I think so. Let me just repeat that then. So basically, you have web components, which are universal in their design and nature. And like Gutenberg, it's like this custom kind of WordPress-ish world. Or same with Drupal, right? Drupal has its certain markup, and also they're not web components at all.
Yes.
And you're saying teach the editor. Would you say teach the editor how to
teach the editor how to edit your visual asset, not build something the editor can modify to visualize it.
Okay, so you're flipping that around a little bit.
So, like for example, this self-check that's sitting here, which is a web component, like this was written by HAX, but now I don't need HAX to present it in any way.
Yeah, because it's just valid. It's just what it should. It's an element and it's a web component, right?
Yeah. So like I could go back to this live stream page here, right? And that we worked on before, and I can hit edit, and I can open up source view. Oh, nothing's there because apparently it's a live demo and nothing ever goes wrong in a live demo. There's a different one. All right. So then I'll copy the source in this page.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then I'll go over to Drupal 8 because HAX is not tied to the Drupal 8 platform and the elements aren't tied to it either. Fire it up.
HAX, the editor itself, does have knowledge of these components through the whatever that package.json file was.
Yes. So it does have knowledge of those. However, any one of these individual elements will work on any website with or without HAX.
Even without the package.json?
Yeah, so long as that component, I mean, well, you have to have gotten the definition initially. So yes, you're like if you were doing an
import.
What?
The import has to be there, right?
Correct. Yes, yes.
Okay.
So, but you don't have to import like the whole HAX ecosystem just to use that.
Okay. So in this case, if you paste this into there, you'd still have to have the import.
Correct. So in this case, it is a little bit of cheating because I've taught Drupal 8 how to register that import definition correctly.
Okay, and Drupal could dynamically pull that somehow, probably. Or
the way that we're recommending doing it is that you have a package JSON and you run a build step, which is there's a function called or a CLI called Polymer Build that resolves where all these things are and like performance optimizes them. But yeah, you could probably have it dynamically resolve or something.
Yeah. Okay. This is
so the reason that this is all the point I'm trying to make. So if I wanted to work on a Wikipedia query, so like this is how our team built the Wikipedia query element. We work in our mono repo amongst all our elements. We run yarn start, and yarn start fires up, and I get a hopefully there we go. I get a nice little documentation site that has all the stuff. So it's this, these elements are self-documenting.
So if that yarn start wraps this in an interface.
Correct. It takes your tag development and puts an interface to it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why Wikipedia query doesn't have this in the UI, but so here's a demo. So this is a little demo site saying, hey, if you use this, then you get this output, right? But HAX isn't here.
This is just the web component.
This is just the web component, so it doesn't care. Like, it said, hey, if HAX is around, and it went, oh, HAX isn't around. I don't care.
And it has that import in its JS file. The web
component. Yes. So then anyone that implemented this Wikipedia query, they get this. It doesn't matter if it's HAX or otherwise.
Okay. And the import is that a ES ECMAScript 6 thing?
Yes. So,
Or do you have to like what do they call it? Transpile that import for probably still do for older browsers?
So yes, that's a good question. So
probably what Polymer does, I'm guessing. Part of
it is a ES6 convention to be able to use import and export syntax. So what the Polymer building routine does, and you could use Webpack for this stuff too, is it resolves where those imports point to, because like I'm using this rather generic like at LRN web components, right? That's not a real path.
Oh, yeah.
So you're incentivized via the tooling to make these like the intention, not the location.
Okay.
And so then the tooling will pick it up, and the way you can see what the output is of that is we ship all the different versions in the same repo. So like this is the ES6 compiled version, and all it's done to make it ES6 compatible is resolve these paths. There we go. So like .node modules / LRN web components, so that's the real location of the thing, not where I'm developing it from.
Yeah.
Then in the case of AMD packaging format, which you need for hitting ES5, like browsers that can't do ES6. So like IE11, some of the older versions of Safari, some iOS devices that probably aren't even supported anymore, and some older Android. So this our tooling that we use in our repo, you can actually set up and run its own repo. So under Elms LN, there's this thing called WC Factory. And so WC Factory is short for Web Component Factory. And this is a tooling, a CLI tooling to generate repos like LRN web components.
Wow. Okay.
So
that's the tooling that you use.
This is the tooling that our team uses to orchestrate our tooling.
Actually, yeah.
So if you wanted to start building an element catalog like we have and publish it to NPM and publish it to webcomponents.org and leverage Lerna and mono repos and a whole bunch of words that make me yawn, then you run one command and it'll get you all of that set up in the way that we build stuff.
Oh, wow.
So like we even use it internally. Mike uses it on, like, his organization has projects that are different from the Elms project, right? So like if they do a website for a department or something, this allows him to build all of those assets in the exact same format, using the same tooling routines. So, I could step in and look at it even and just be like, oh yeah, I know how this website's made because I know all the tooling as to how this was assembled. It's easy to publish those projects to NPM as a separate organization. It's kind of scripted all of that stuff out of the way.
Yeah. Wow. All right. This is all right. So this, are you guys implementing this now live, or is this still kind of pre-launch phase?
So HAX CMS, we're working pretty heavily on getting into a state where we're going to start using it for production usage. Okay. I mean, the GitHub website is the little hackstheweb.org website is a proof of concept of just the entire end-to-end pipeline, right? Of like, hey, I just use a UI and it's orchestrating Git commits and it's using HAX as the editing experience, and then it's pushing out to GitHub.
You still have to push. Oh no! Oh, your PHP backend actually, after your local PHP actually does the push too.
Yes, sir. So when you initially get HAX CMS, there's a settings button on the home page, or if I have it here somewhere, and if you hit that the first time, there's this like, hey, set up your configure. So like you would paste in your YouTube key, and then you would get YouTube search.
Okay. Do you care about anybody seeing these keys right now?
Not really. These are like for demo purposes. Honestly, they don't have any write access.
Okay. So All right, so if somebody wanted to just get up and running, they could use one of these and type it manually.
I mean, most of the demos that are out there, because like if I show a demo and it's like, hey, you could search NASA, people are like, I don't give a crap about searching images from NASA. I mean, they're cool looking, but like, I don't need them for this client.
Yeah.
But like, if I throw YouTube and Vimeo in there, you go, oh, okay, yes, now I get it.
Yeah.
But the first time that you run this, that user org and that email part are not like blocked off. And then there's the first time. So the first time you set it up, there's a password field that says in big letters, this is not stored anywhere. And so the very first time that you set this up, when I do ddev start, it creates a public-private key pair in the container. And then when I put in,
uses the GitHub API to manage keys.
Yes, sir. So then I log in via the GitHub API. I ship the key up there as a public key. I destroy the password, and now you have said, "Hey, I authorize this container to do GitHub publishing on my behalf."
Okay, that's similar to a, what do they call it in GitHub, application token or whatever it is.
Yes.
All right, so you're just kind of checking your password one time to the API call, and that password has access to do that stuff.
Yes, and so you did ask if we were using this in production. So we are using a. So we have been switching for the last few months over to the actual specification of web components. When you heard me first start rambling about this technology, we were using what was called the V0 spec of web components, which was not fully agreed upon by all the vendors. It was integrated via HTML imports, which didn't take off. It had some problems with it gaining wide adoption, but it's largely the same code. Like so we went through and started porting all of our stuff to V1, which is adopted by everybody.
Okay.
Edge, when Edge switches over to be Chromium under the hood, then Edge will pick up all the spec. And then the only thing you'll have to deliver a polyfill to is like super old stuff and IE11, which is under the super old stuff category.
Which is still being deployed today on these Windows 7 installations. And
yeah, I know, it won't die. So, I mean, you can hit those as a target. So with the V1 spec elements, you can hit like 90, I think I was able to verify 98.3% of all browsing traffic globally without any, like just doing front end rendering. Unverified, I'm pretty sure it was like 99.2% of all browser traffic.
Polyfills stuff?
Yeah, so like, yes, with the polyfills.
Okay.
So like some of those extra percentages is trying to eke out, polyfill-esque. And then honestly, you get to a point with some stuff that it's so old that it's like your sysadmins are probably blocking the traffic anyway. Which was, a nice side effect of Heartbleed. Like when the Heartbleed bug happened, sysadmins started forcibly blocking things that wouldn't do that type of encryption. Well, that nullified IE 6, 7, 8, 9 right there. Like that's how those got dissolved. So we're using the V0 spec elements in production. We have been for about the last 2 years now that we've been doing just web components more holistically. So like all of our systems in Elm's Learning Network leverage web components. And then HAX specifically, we've been doing like internal beta testing in real courses that we run for the last few months now. It's in a very limited release because we've been working hard on this on the V1 spec elements. So like we've been getting good feedback. I mean, we know it has some issues internally with the V0 version, and we've put those fixes into the V1 version. And so all the stuff that I just showed you now, we're going to start using in production within the next month.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it's very close. Like it's...
and your backends, are they Drupal based? Are they all sorts of different backends then?
Elm's LN is Drupal 7 based.
Okay.
But I mean, I wrote the integrations for the other platforms in part to be able to just challenge conventions that people have around coupling functionality to platforms. I mean, like Grav CMS, I stopped using Grav CMS because I wrote an integration for HAX for Grav CMS, and then it immediately made me question why I needed Grav CMS.
Oh, yeah,
And
because
so
you have a similar system where it can mirror your content to GitHub, which I think Grav has something like. I did, I was going to build my site in Grav, and I actually saw your HAX editor pop up as one of the plugins, and then I ended up using Gatsby, but I don't think that was particularly. Oh yeah, it's because it had progressive web app support out of the box for that particular theme or whatever I got, and it just worked. And I think there's more work to be done at Grav CMS. But anyway, sorry to ramble about that. So I did see the HAX plugin now on Grav's plugin search.
Yep. So I mean, it's over there. I mean, we're also working on the automated PWAs are really popular in web components universe as far as like coupling the two approaches together. So yeah. I mean, I'm a couple cups of coffee and not having to write proposals away from automating the PWA setup, so that when you go to hackstheweb.org, it'll be like, hey, do you want to download for offline use?
Nice. Yeah, that's huge. And getting the working service worker cache and all that stuff. I was going to ask you about that, the PWA support, because that was really appealing from a performance perspective for me.
Yeah, we need to. I need to figure out more of the internals of that. Like an area where we get a little caught up with like, are we doing this the right way? Because we're kind of building this weird thing that no one else really is.
Yeah.
Is industry, like, and by industry, I'll say like Google largely, right? Or like McDonald's uses Polymer. Vaden is a company built around web components largely at this point. Ionic, that does like mobile apps, is using a lot of web components. So like, we'll say that.
Yeah, Ionic does the like, I'm going to upload my app and it's going to convert it into native app, right?
Yeah, and so they make something called Stencil, which is you write stuff in JSX, and then their tooling compiles it down to a vanilla web component. So it's ultra performant. It has no dependencies. If you're okay with things being compiled in that manner, but industry largely, right, is around the use case you said, right? Like, hey, we're building this app. And what is this app going to do? Well, this app has to be fast. It has to work offline. It needs to have a time to first paint of like 0, because I need to sell you a widget. And so I'm going to easily sell you a widget if I can get my development team to really be optimized, run a single script, crush everything down as small as possible, and put it out there.
Yeah.
And where we're different is, one, we're in education. I already have a captive audience. So like, if I ship something and it takes 4 seconds to download, I'm not losing widgets as like just a baseline, like where we're different from kind of where other people's concerns are. Now, that doesn't mean we don't care about performance, but it means I can push ahead and ship something that isn't, insanely high performance, get feedback on it, and then make it more performant.
Yeah.
Versus a company can't do that.
So yeah, it's basically your in the LMS field, like the learning, I mean, most of those systems are like crazy slow, like in my experience.
No, but it's not just your experience; it's everybody.
Okay, it is. So you can ship just the same performance experience or better, and it'll be fine.
So it was a fun contrast. One day, me and a colleague we were arguing about the way to ship something from a performance perspective. Like, do we bundle everything and ship it to you, like Webpack style, or do we compress everything, ship you like all the references, and then know that when you go to the next web page, you'll use 95% of the same references, and so you already have those pre-cached, right? So it's like an initial, flash of style content versus the long term. I'm not sending all these bundles. It's actually a weird feedback loop in the like Drupal community around like advanced aggregates and the compressing of JavaScript derivatives, where like we started to notice increased performance when we didn't compress them, because we had a captive audience and we had people coming, and then they'll go to 100 pages. And so instead of shipping you a different JavaScript bundle on each of those 100 pages, it made more sense for us to ship you, one bundle and then like 10 others, kind of a thing, like a lot more bundles. But so we're sitting there arguing about this.
And then you have HTTP2, which can speed up all that when it's unbundled.
So when you go to hackstheweb.org, if you actually do a network inspect, you'll see it just sent you like 400 plus calls.
Huh.
And like it loads pretty fast.
Even is that one or two?
It's on HTTP2.
Oh, okay. So it's taking advantage of all that. What do they call that?
It's a push stuff, I think.
Well, no, there's another term for it. Multiplexing or something.
Oh yeah. Yes, I believe that's the word. Multiplexing.
Yeah. So you can.
So yeah, we're already leveraging that.
You have assets in any order with HTTP2 versus one. You have to send them in order.
Yeah. So they load pretty fast in that way. However, the whole time we're having this conversation about the way we're going to ship this stuff, guy next to us is using a vendor-supported product in the learning management space that he had hit refresh on 10 minutes earlier.
Okay.
And it hadn't loaded yet.
10, really?
I didn't say seconds.
Okay.
Which was the equivalent of a just like e-textbook thing that had some like math in it or something.
Yeah,
and it was like
the work that you're doing combined with the progressive web apps and the kind of pre-browser cache. So a service worker is like a lower level cache, and that is like the experience is potentially going to be like native apps pretty soon, and it's just going to blow everybody away. I think it's going to be, everything else is going to feel slower and slower because we're going to expect at least sub 1 second load times.
Yeah, and
you're getting really close to that. It seems like.
I mean, that was part of our rationale behind picking web components as well. Was like our stuff has gotten faster, like without us really investing a lot in specifically performance, and like it's because we're working at this almost like layer below where traditional applications, have been built, and now traditional applications are. You go to 2014, here's the best practice for building something. Well, that's now like, hey, if you can generate web components that work everywhere and they just basically extend a class of the browser. I mean, now granted, we use Polymer. We use, Polymer for probably 95% of our elements, but Polymer is a pretty small library. They
have a small version too, don't they?
And then lit element is even smaller.
So is that, you said the Polymer team is working on lit? Is that like their successor?
Yeah, kind of. It's it's the Polymer people, much like how there's Elm's Learning Network, a group of people that work on stuff, and then Elm's Learning Network, a very specific Drupal configuration. Polymer, I think, made the same type of mistake where there's like the Polymer team, and then there's Polymer CLI, and there's Polymer build tools. Except you don't need to use the Polymer project to use any of the CLI. Like it works with native web components, it works with other people's web components because it's just compiling to the spec. But like they conflated it, putting the name in there. So like Polymer 3 is the last version of things called Polymer that are a library, and then it's lit element. So
okay, that's really good to know. Polymer 3 is the end.
Yes, it's the end, and it's not like this is deprecated. No, it's just like this reached the logical endpoint of this project. Like it does all the things it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Part of why we adopted it 2 years ago is I think it had a tagline of like the incredibly disappearing library or something like that. I saw a post. It is because each version release, they took functionality out. And that was like so mind-bending to us when we were looking at it. Like, wait, new versions of things add. Like, why is this removing stuff? And it's because they're like, well, the browser's getting better. We don't need to keep adding stuff. Like the browser itself is getting better. We can remove stuff, or we can say, hey, use this native thing instead of this, helper we were giving you. And so lit element is like if we were to build this whole thing, except the starting point is all browsers natively work with this. And now it's still lit element can be compiled back to IE 11, but it's built with less training wheels. It's built on this lightning fast DOM diffing, template diffing thing called lit HTML. And so it's an
old, kind of like what React was trying to or does, not trying to, but is it kind of like what React does, the DOM diffing?
Kind of, but the my understanding, like this is where I get a little off the island as to whether or not I know anything in that area. But the my understanding is that React is like a virtual DOM diff, and then it's updating things in place there, versus lit HTML and lit element are like taking the selected area and just like pinpricking that one thing, so that if you were printing a property there, so an attribute, it just updates that one piece in that one little location. That's my understanding of it, though. So I mean, that could be.
I have seen I think some of the browser developers, I won't say their names, but I don't know if it's the right ones, but some of the Chrome developers, I follow them on Twitter, and I think I have seen arguments for saying that things can be just as fast as React's virtual DOM, based on using this technology, or maybe if they expose this or whatever. So that's interesting to hear. So they're achieving parallel performance times probably as React.
Yeah, I think lit element just released, or Justin Ferragati, I think I can't remember how to pronounce his name, but he released a like performance testbed chart, and shows like lit element as like way faster than pretty much everything else. Not everything yet, but like pretty much everything else, in a lot of different ES6 tests. So I don't know. I just saw a screenshot, but
okay,
some of this stuff is like so new. I mean, lit element just went full stable release, like version 1.0.0, like 2 days ago.
Is Eric Beidelman in that one too? He was the Polymer developer advocates.
I'm not sure. I don't recognize that name.
He's at Google, and he posts a lot about Polymer, and I follow him. But wow. All right. So you guys are about to go live with the rewrite into version 1 v1 of web component specification, and Drupal 7 is the backend powering this, and your editors will all be, I shouldn't say editors, like you have more than just content. You have like quizzes and exams and other like functionality, not just content, right?
Yeah, I mean, we do have some quizzes and exams and things. We don't have a lot of time that's been invested in those things, mostly because like the university has traditional learning management systems.
Oh, you're not using Drupal for the learning management system.
Yeah, so it is a little odd. Like Elm's Learning Network is technically called like a NGDLE, or Next Generation Digital Learning Environment, okay. Which the difference is that like it's a platform that's kind of more remixable. Like, hey, you want to like we have a studio, an online art studio that's kind of like a internal facing version of like an Instagram. If you had like a closed Instagram community and only people in that community could see it. And I'm not going to say we have the same usability as Instagram, but like that general idea, right? That I can comment and like my friends' work. And then in a course context, it's like, well, we're critiquing each other because you grow as an artist, because you review each other's work and kind of compare off of it. Instructor gives you like a general idea of a thing to complete an assignment, and then you all share our photos in the space kind of a thing and have a conversation. So that's one system in Elm's Learning Network. So a course might be delivered through like a traditional learning management system, but then the learning management system is basically just making sure that like people know what the syllabus is, people know what the dates are, and people know where to go get their grades.
And that's the Drupal, that'll be the HAX Drupal integration there. Is that right? Is Drupal delivering the learning management system through Drupal, or is it like kind of shuffling that through, or is the user actually accessing the other system directly?
Here, our students start at the other system, and then they kind of matriculate through to our systems. So like our systems are, a lot of them, done primarily for content, because learning management systems are really bad at content management.
Okay.
So then that's where HAX will really shine, as far as like, we have people that are editing course content, and that course content happens to be, you know, a student goes like, hey, I'm taking this online course, and then I click the button and I go to your system.
Okay.
So like, they're not spending a lot of time in the LMS, but because we're the primary difference, LMS is like a one-stop shop. It has all this functionality, and you only use it in this very rigid way. Versus an NGDLE is much more like, we have some courses that are content driven. We have some courses that use our studio. We have some courses that use both. It's much more of a like mix and match, you know, nature of experimentation. We've built discussion board systems before. We've built microblogging platforms before in Elms Learning Network. So it's much more like, oh, what is it you're trying to do? And then build an environment for that instructional purpose, as opposed to like, a lot of teachers come in and then it's like, hey, here's the things you have access to, and then you just use them.
Okay.
So web components allow us to build all that stuff at a really high level of consistency visually, with lots of different systems, and, you know, automate accessibility. Not all of it, but like huge swaths of accessibility automated just by, you know, making a button work consistently, and then leveraging the button instead of writing the button tag every time or whatever.
Yeah. That gets, the drift happens quite a bit with that stuff. Yeah. Wow. This is coming up on 2 hours. Thanks for going over. I don't know if we actually discussed it an hour long or not, but I had time, so I'm glad you did too.
Yeah, it's the end of the work day here, so now I can.
Oh, 5 o'clock.
Yeah, 5 o'clock. Now I can go home. I can eat dinner, and then I can probably go back to work.
Wow. Well, I could see doing a part 2 if you're ever interested. There's a lot more questions and about things I have, but this was really good, and I think I could definitely direct some other people to this recording at some point.
Cool.
I have had like a lot of lingering questions. Well, I'm mostly back-end development, and I don't get to play with front-end much at all. Like actual like tasks, you know, I get to play it in my spare time. But you answered so many questions of just like, where do web components live these days, you know, and that's really good. And HAX is pretty powerful, and you guys have a Drupal 7 and 8 integration already written.
Yep,
and,
6, 7, and 8.
6, 7.
I went all the way back to 6 because why not at that point?
But you have to have like a REST module installed for that. Is that right?
You have to have the REST WS module installed in Drupal 7. In Drupal 6, I don't know that I actually implemented the file upload aspect, because I was like, I'm not actually using this. It was kind of just to prove it's possible.
Okay.
But I mean, it would be easy enough to write the file upload piece even without a REST backend.
Well, I mean, like for instance, updating content. How do you do that in Drupal then? Just posting?
Yeah, it's just posting to an endpoint, and then I make a menu path, and then I just collect that and sanitize it. So it's not a pure REST endpoint. It's just very specific to saving a node body in a Drupal context.
Just pulling it out and pushing it back in. Okay. Wow. Sweet. All right, Bryan.
Cool. Well, you do ask good questions, Elijah.
Oh, thank you.
So I appreciate you sticking with me through my madness here.
It's good. I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm excited to see the progressive web app support, I guess, out of the box as well. That is one of the reasons I chose Gatsby.js as starter theme or whatever for my personal blog, is because I'm a performance. I get it's been one of the coolest things for service worker mainly, getting that kind of just instant load right out of service worker cache. And then I haven't even played with it much, but that it can fetch those heavier assets in the background and update its cache and kind of like the background. I'm just so excited for like what the web is going to become pretty soon.
Are you going to DrupalCon this year?
I'm planning on it. Yeah, I missed.
I mean, it's right in your neck of the woods. So
yeah, my latest employer. They want to send me there, so I'm really excited to go there again. If not, I'll probably go anyway because it's so close. But,
cool. Well, we'll be there. We're doing a talk with Kendall and Cass from Red Hat about web components. So the name of the talk is "Make Web Development Fun Again."
That's cool.
It stopped being fun for a long time, and I didn't participate in front end development because it was just so confusing, and my job was back end systems too.
Yeah.
And then, the web component stuff is so approachable by comparison that you know it's you're not saying like, hey, we're building a whole application. Like you can start and say like, I just want to like implement one modal or something, right? Like you can take like a little tiny brick and then have that be the seed of like, all right, well now I'll do this and I'll do this and I'll do this and I'll do this. And I mean, where we started is we were just taking normal Drupal template files and then replacing our HTML guts of those files with web components. And then in the theme, we would just add the reference to that web component and then simplified our templating system like instantly.
Wow.
But like approaching it that way, right? Like that's not the way you're going to approach like a React app. You're going to approach it from a full-on application. You're going to do a full rebuild or whatever. You're not going to be like, let's just replace the button or whatever.
Yeah, you're not going to just shove React in there and just start. Yeah.
I mean, unless you're WordPress.
Is that what they did?
I mean, Gutenberg. The Gutenberg block system is like these little React snippets.
Yeah. Well,
so.
Okay. Oh, so they just shove React snippets inside your HTML, basically?
I mean, that's my understanding. I need to get more into the weeds on it to see what's going on that level.
Okay.
If you play around with WordPress and just install Gutenberg and then inspect the output, like view source on the page, it was enough for me to go like, this is not the right way. Like it's encoding JSON. It's encoding JSON structure in comments, in HTML comments, and then just spitting it into the page. And then when the Gutenberg editor comes in, it like decodes those and turns them into the little block areas.
Okay. That's totally not, yeah, I see what you're saying. That's not very clean. It's just messy.
Yeah, it's not semantic. I mean,
yeah.
So then, what I keep saying to people in an education context, because WordPress is big in education, is like, are you going to just use WordPress forever? Because like, how are you going to migrate off of that? I mean, when I use CK Editor, I'm not locked into CK Editor. I mean, that is an advantage of TinyMC and CK Editor. It's just editing an HTML blob. This is like imbuing the HTML blob with these like hyper-specific WordPress React components.
Wow.
So like if you're never going to migrate off WordPress, then that's fine. But like, are you going to then just keep doing integrations for this React WordPress gobbledygook? Or like let's just extend what the DOM knows how to handle, and then my web editor just edits the DOM. Like, yeah, you could say, well, if you have an image and you put it in a tag that's now called meme maker, that you're tied to the definition of a meme maker, but in that case, you're tied to the web component standard. You're not tied to a platform, right? Because
you're tied to the web platform.
Yeah, you're tied to the web platform, and hell, we're all tied there anyway. So
yeah, the future is the web. Huh. Well, I see what you're saying. Yeah, this does. I mean, it's clean. It's like the markup generated is web components, and as long as you have the imports there, basically, then you're good. It's portable across 98% of browsers. You said now.
With the polyfills, yeah, I was able to verify 98. I think without poly, I mean, now granted, it just means the integration routine has the polyfill accounted for, but without the need for polyfills and just serving native ES6, you can currently hit like 85% of browsers. Firefox just put dynamic imports into Firefox Nightly, which is unfortunate. It's something I use heavily. It's not really part of the web component spec, but I use it heavily, dynamic imports. So
dynamic imports are what you showed me, or they're not? That's something
so different. A dynamic import is the same concept of like, hey, import this resource, except you can do it like dynamically, like, hey, when this JavaScript function runs, I want you to import this other JavaScript module.
Oh, so you don't have to do it all at once.
Yes.
Oh, that's a nice performance boost.
Yeah. So you could get into a, time to first paint. Hey, let's just ship you that one tag definition. It unpacks maybe 10 more. And then once I've given you that first paint and theme, maybe then we start progressively dynamically importing the rest of the elements. And I only partially do this. I'm not saying that we have that methodology all worked out. We're kind of hashing it out. But that isn't available in Firefox yet. It just got into Nightly, which means for Firefox users, we serve ES5 AMD compiling, which is the same one that like IE 11 and stuff gets, unfortunately. But 12 weeks from now, or whatever that is, their release cycle, I think it's every 6 weeks or something. There's a new version, but whatever that release cycle is, that then Firefox will have native imports, which then my detection script on all my sites will switch it over feature detect wise to ES6. So because of the way I'm doing it, you did see that like I did have an issue with Firefox that I illustrated.
Yeah.
Right, where it didn't load. I'm still trying to clean up what that is. But in 12 weeks, the way I have the script written, when it detects that it can do ES modules and when it detects that it can do dynamic imports, Firefox browsers will just start getting the ES6 native version instead of the ES5 version.
So the server does that? That's the server?
I'm like, that's a whole like conversation arc around like server-side rendering versus front end.
Yeah.
I'm pushing front end.
I'm sorry, you're detecting though. You're detecting. So there's like, what is it? Modernize. What is it? What was that library called? That front end library that detects.
Modernizer, I think was the one. It's sort of
Modernizer for the back end on server side.
I'm not like Google and some others do like server-side rendering.
How do you detect that Firefox has that new feature? And
I do that on the fly.
On the front end.
Yeah, the front end actually, when I do builds, it splits everything into an ES5 version and ES6 version.
Yeah.
And so when you load the page, it does a real quick feature detect of can you handle ES modules and can you handle dynamic imports? And if you can, then it serves you the ES6 version. But that all happens on the front end.
So the server, it still serves you all that from the server then.
Yeah, it's still giving you all the assets, but the detection's happening client side, which is, and again, that's something that kind of puts what we're doing at odds with general convention. Yeah. I don't know that I'm going to stick to that. But with HAX CMS and with HAX in general, like I'm trying to decentralize publishing. Like this is part of why there's so much madness to this is I want people to have self-expression and it be done in a platformless way. Right? Like in Beaker browser, when you can just edit files in your file system, you serve them up to another human being, that takes out all the power brokers involved.
That's true.
And that's not going to scale, obviously, right? I mean, like people are not going to buy that as a product or whatever, but like there's a lot of knowledge on the web that just disappears whenever corporations go out of business. I mean, we saw in the Drupal community with Examiner, like Examiner went away. It was a huge Drupal 7 site. It had a ton of community blogs. All that knowledge is just gone. And so like it's kind of in part, I try to frame HAX from this like ideological perspective, which is why I'm so anti, Gutenberg of like, no, you're not tying me to some giant monolith of a platform. Like that's not going to happen. It doesn't matter how good the platform is. It doesn't matter how many people it empowers. You're not going to tie me to tethered to that platform. Like if I'm going to be tethered to anything, it's this web browser I'm talking to you on right now. And so if we can release platforms in such a way that, yes, they can integrate into existing systems, but they also have the ability to be untethered, whether that's in Beaker or whether that's static site generation. I mean, that's a huge reason people love like Jekyll and Markdown historically, is it's in a format that they have forever. Like Markdown is, your Markdown file on your desktop's not going to break.
Yeah.
But, you know, for decades, the Microsoft Word file on your desktop changed versions all the time. You needed to convert it, and I couldn't export it correctly. Oh, you can't print the PDF, like all this silly business, when really it's like, it's the same stinking content. I just want this thing to run.
Yeah, that's true. Huh. So yeah, well, we can do like a part 2.
yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, would you be up for a part 2 sometime?
Yeah, sure. This was fun.
Cool. All right. This was really informative, and super thank you for sharing your time and going over this.
Well, thank you for obliging me and and recording it and asking really good questions, because I mean, you're right, these types of questions come up quite a bit, but I usually get like bits and pieces of a message like asking one thing. So like, this is probably the best recorded holistic end-to-end of everything involving HAX right now. So it does take a long time to explain. It's kind of a massive conceptual model shift. So thank you for
it. Is, yeah, and the DAX, DATS thing was really interesting to go down that road for a little bit too, because that has a lot of power behind there. I think I'm not fully realizing yet.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, you have to keep playing with it and see that, like, there's a Twitter clone on there, and like, even just playing with it, like, it kind of makes you start to question, like, wait, why do I go to this? Like, I'm going to a company every day. Like, I'm giving them my data, my information. That company could go out of business. That company could, you know, deplatform me or whatever. Like, that could just dry up and be gone.
So with that model, like, the thing is that my brain is like working on that right now is like, well, your computer has to be on for your content to be available, right? Or
there are ways around that, yeah.
Or some kind of a shared node that's like,
yeah. So I think that's part of their theoretical business model. Is the there's I think it's called like hashbase.io is the address. And so you can request a nicer looking address. That's how I have that hackcms.hashbase.io address.
Oh yeah.
And so I think that the part of the concept is like, that Hashbase code base is free. Like, that whole service is open source, because you're, like you said, with nodes, right? If you get enough nodes that basically would say, I go and I make an account at Hashbase, I paste my data in there, I give it a nice looking URL, right? Something I can send people to. But then I think you can pay them, and they'll basically mirror, because you can do peer-to-peer nodes that mirror each other's stuff.
Yeah.
So what you can set up with them is like almost like a publishing model, where you're on your computer, I edit some stuff, I hit save, but I've paid for their service, and their service is mirroring nodes on the network, just checks in every few minutes and goes like, oh, there's a new copy, pulls it. And then if I close my laptop and you try to access that site, you'll get it off of them instead of off me.
Okay, so it can route around that, or route from multiple sources then.
Yeah, so that you can, if you had enough decentralized nodes that were mirroring that address, you kind of have this peer-to-peer content delivery network, and you could keep a site online. The other service they provide is HTTPS mirroring. So they'll take your site and they'll mirror it from DAT over to HTTPS at the same address. And so then, you know, you could publish direct files from your computer, just hit save, and pretty much know in a few seconds they're going to be live on the web at a real address.
But in that case, it's just content locally. That's that hash, right? And then it just it could be Markdown, it could be whatever application is rendering that doesn't matter. So the DAT browser still has to have a JavaScript engine, CSS engine,
Yep.
all that stuff, and they probably, I'm guessing they might be using Chromium for some of that stuff.
Yeah. Beaker is just riding on top of Chromium. I think Beaker's built in Electron as well. I'm not positive.
Oh, okay. I think you might be right. When I installed it, it was probably doing some Electron stuff. I think I saw it. Okay. So hash base.
I think it's called hashbase.io.
Like their model is kind of like a hosting. You pay to host with them, basically.
I think it's kind of like that. That's an area where like I played with stuff and it was really cool, and then I was like, this is a huge rabbit hole. I need to not go down right now. I need to pay attention to other things.
Yeah.
But
then you made the copy. You literally just had that. You made the copy because it could create a local kind of file system.
Yep.
Whereas the browser can't do that yet, right?
Yeah, the browser doesn't have.
Oh no, the make a copy thing is probably built into the peer-to-peer API.
Yeah,
That's
it's like
I see. Okay, there's no API in Chrome to make a copy of something like that because it has nowhere to save it. And Beaker's whole like model is like make a copy and then you can have it at your own URL, decentralized. So that's why. Okay, that's all tying together now. Okay. All right, sweet. Okay, I gotta take a bio break. Any last words or any kind of things that you think we missed that you want to talk about?
No, I mean, should do it again sometime.
Yeah, part 2. All righty.
Cool. All right. Have a good weekend, Elijah.
Yes, you too, Brian. Have a good night. Bye.